Hey folks, David Stewart here. It's time to talk a little bit about the culture war. Yes, I've been seeing your comments over the last few weeks with some of the videos I've made talking about like race swapping characters or changing character traits, about what these things mean in the context of the culture war. Now, a lot of you might be hip on the culture war, but some of you may not. Boils down to this: you have a group of cultural Marxists that are taking control of properties that are relevant to the culture and altering them to reflect a different perspective, a leftist perspective, a cultural Marxist perspective. So it's really cultural Marxists or extreme leftists, and then just everybody else. That's the way that the culture war has really panned out. Now, here's the reality for those of you who are interested in this. A couple realities. The first one is most people don't know and don't care about the culture war. That is reality. Normies aren't aware of it and don't really care about it. They don't care about the fighting on the internet. They don't care about what race Ariel happens to be, or if they do care, the caring is such a minuscule thing compared to everything else that it just doesn't affect the normies. The normies are not part of this. The normies are in the middle. Now, normies are still going to have some relevancy to this because it's normies that decide whether these cultural properties succeed or fail. So when we're talking about things like movie franchises, this is the other reality, which is that the left has fully converged most of these organizations, most of the media organizations in the country. That includes newspapers, it includes network news programs, even Fox News to a certain extent, but certainly things like MSNBC and CNN. It includes media companies like Disney, which now owns 20th Century Fox, their movie division. So most of the movies that you're going to see are going to be created by companies that are fully converged. That is, they're totally in control by leftist elements that want to promote through the art their particular ideal sets. And the other thing is the law is working in tandem with that. So even though you might want to make a Star Wars movie, you might be a billionaire that would like to fund a Star Wars movie. You cannot legally make a Star Wars movie because, according to the government, Disney owns Star Wars, and they can sue anyone who chooses to make a Star Wars movie. Not only do they own that, they own Marvel, so they own all the properties within Marvel. Now that they own 20th Century, they own all of the properties that 20th Century Fox had, which is most of the movie franchises over the last 40 or 50 years. So the entirety of popular culture has been concentrated in the hands of a few media companies. Disney, Sony, which owns a huge portion of the music market, among others, the Turner companies, which was Time Warner, things like that. So anyway, the small group, the small cabal of companies essentially buys up these properties, not just to make money off of them. That's a surface level argument. It's one I've made, and it's true. They do want to make money on what they're doing, but one of the ways that you can make money is by monopolizing things. So you capture a monopoly of all the things which are culturally relevant, at least, so that you can alter all the messaging that exists in them, sometimes subtly, sometimes aggressively, to match the worldview that you want people to adapt to. Now, this originates really in the Marxist perspective. If you go all the way back to Marx and all of the people that have descended from Marx, you have this belief that you can remake the man, that the nature of the human being can be altered if you can tinker around with it, right? If you give them the right set of art to consume, if you give them the right information and you exclude other information which will pervert them. This was part of the mission of re-education camps in socialist countries, was you take somebody that has a certain mindset and you're going to transform them into a different person. And part of the belief of the communist perspective, really, I mean, Marxist-Leninism, is that you were going to remake the man into a man who can actually achieve communism. That through socialism, you reform human nature, you reform the people into people who can achieve a communist society, and the state would wither away, and you'd have a classless, stateless society at the end. So cultural Marxism is attempting to achieve that rather than control of the means of production by the government, but taking over of the means of production by communists, by people who believe in these leftist perspectives. And so the attacks on all of the traditional the traditional staples of society are ongoing. There's attacks against the family. You're going to see repeated and ongoing news articles about how bad it is to have children and how they cost so much money and how they cause stress or take years off of your life. I tell you what really takes years off of your life is not having children around to know when you need additional care at the end of your life. That will literally take years off your life. You need people around to care for you when you get old. But also children are a joy, and I can tell you that from my experience and most of the experiences of people who have functional families. Now, if you have a non-functional family, it's going to be tougher. But that's what infuses our culture, is this constant telling you that the family's bad, constant telling that white people are bad, that European culture is bad, that the cultures which produced the great expansion of economic and technological wealth that has lifted not just Europeans, but most of the people in the world out of poverty, right? The entire humanity has grown and become more prosperous as a result of technological increases. And we're more keenly aware of poverty throughout the world because everybody else has been so lifted out of it. We're so fabulously wealthy as the result of capitalism and the result of the technology we've created, the result of free markets and free exchange of ideas, that when somebody is poor, which is the normal state of humanity prior to the Industrial Revolution, it's that much more painful and easy to see. The poverty of Africa is not the result of capitalism or colonialism. Africa is richer than it was probably under certainly the pre-colonial times, but it's compared to the massive expansion outside of Africa. We can see that there are many troubles with poverty in Africa and in other places of the world as well. Going back to this idea of the culture war, the reality is that you have the government is supporting the control of these cultural staples. Some people have called Star Wars a part of our cultural heritage. It is something that's relevant beyond just a creation of art. It's something that's relevant to the West. It's relevant to all the people as a part of our mythology. And that's an interesting way to look at it. And it's all the more important when you look at it that you, at least in concept, do not allow these, I guess, unelected corporations to seize control over the cultural artifacts and pervert them and turn them into what they want them to. So that means, how do you win the culture war? Well, you don't win the culture war by complaining about what the converged corporations do with the franchises that you like. You actually win the culture war because ultimately you can't change that. Now, you can change the law. You can try to petition to change the law, but of course it's going to be an uphill battle to try to reduce the rights of copyright holders to just be something merely owning the copyright up until one's death, rather than corporate ownership in perpetuity. Which is what if we haven't reached that point, I think we're going to evolve to that point where copyrights and trademarks are owned trademarks of creative properties like Star Wars are owned in perpetuity by corporate holding companies, which means as long as the corporation's alive, they will own and be able to sue anyone that uses what they consider their intellectual property. This is very far beyond what anyone thought of as artistic copyright, whether in a philosophical sense or a legal sense, when these ideas were first being developed into law. So how do you win this? Well, you don't win it by complaining. You don't win by making tons and tons of content. Like, I made a lot of Star Wars content, so I'm part of the problem to an extent, because that creates an amplifying effect. The culture war, simply amplifies the existence of property. So if Disney comes out with a Little Mermaid that race swaps everything around and has it all kind of upside down and weird, and everybody's complaining about it, well, that creates that friction between these two parties, which don't make up the majority. We have the normies in the middle. It just amplifies the content for the normies. So the normies are going to be more aware of these products that are continued to be put out by these corporations. So the first thing is, you actually have to evangelize normies to a certain extent. You have to turn the normies into hip people. You have to convince them that they shouldn't go see Disney movies, that they should ignore these things, that they're garbage, because they are. And you can do that in a couple ways. First of all, you're probably not going to turn a normie into somebody who like cruises Chan's, but you can at least make him interested in things that are a little bit more niche and not controlled by big corporations. You can get somebody into more indie gaming rather than big AAA titles. That's an easy one, right? It's hey, I played this game, you should play it. You have to evangelize normies. It's kind of like being a Christian in the church. You got to go out and convert the masses. And you can even, in fact, that is a way that you can win the culture wars. You evangelize people who are not in the church yet. You get more people to be religious, even regardless of what your religion is. If you're a Buddhist and you go out and you get more people who are not spiritual to come into a Buddhist way of thinking, that's also probably going to improve the outlook for the culture, even though Buddhism is not part of the West. So that even that I could see improving things. So that's the big one. The other one is you have to stop watching the movies, even out of some perverted sense of like watching the cars crash in a NASCAR race. Not that I've ever watched a NASCAR, but you watch the car, you can't look away. It's too much of a temptation. You got to get into different stuff. So the main way you win the culture war is through books. Books are going to be it. And I totally have skin in this game. And people will say, you're shilling for books, you evil author. Someone said this on the live stream, and I said, you're going to win it with books. Why books? Whether it's a novel or it's going to be comic books or graphic novels. Why is that? Why are these going to win the culture war? Well, quite simply is that these can be produced by a small number of people very easily, very cheaply, and to a highly original degree. So my books are produced by me, by just me all by myself. They're my artistic expression. And so I don't need any money to write a book. I need $0. I can put out a book for literally $0 if I want to. I'm talking like free software. I can make covers with free software and write it on free programs like Google Documents or something and be able to actually publish the book and have it be functional and be what I want it to on $0. And you can too. So books are going to be the key, which means there's a ton of books, there's a ton of great authors, there's a ton of original stories, and not only that, there's a ton of stories that you are going to enjoy. If you are a Star Wars fan, there are a ton of space opera books on the Kindle store that you can pick up and read that are as good as the Extended Universe novels, if not better, more original, in some cases not more original, same flavor as Star Wars, just different, little bit different concepts because you can't copy things exactly, but in the tradition of Star Wars, we should say. If you think of Star Wars as a storytelling tradition, there are many books that will fulfill your desires in that. And whatever you happen to be into, if you're into fantasy, if you're into superheroes, there's indie comics, there's indie novels. All of that stuff is coming out, and it's cheap. And it's easy to get. This book you can get the ebook for 99 cents. My new one, Voices of the Void, you can get for 99 cents. The paperback's a little more. It's like $4 or $5 or something. Still, though, how much do you pay for a DVD, right? Or a Blu-ray? You may pay $15-$20 for a Blu-ray, and it lasts for the same amount of time as reading this book, 2 hours. Right? This is a 2-hour book. I specifically made it to be a 2-hour book. This new one I specifically made to be it's a little bit over 2 hours. It's a little bit longer than this one, but 2-hour book. So the time it would take to watch a movie, you can sit down and you can read this book and enjoy it. And it costs you less, and it will be a more satisfying experience. It'll be a more original experience, and it'll be an experience that's more in tune with artistic expression. And by not committing that 2 hours to watching something that is going to frustrate you or represents a destruction of your culture, you're reading 2 hours that represents the furtherment of the culture, right? The continuance of the Western tradition. This is definitely Western traditional fantasy, and Voices of the Void is Western sci-fi horror. So if you're a fan of Aliens or you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, you'll probably like my new book, Voices of the Void. I had a very interesting time reading it, and I hope you will take a look at it. You can actually get it for free by joining my mailing list at dvspress.com channel.com/list, just so you know. There are many other artists. I am going to start transitioning the channel to focusing more on these indie artists and being able to give them exposure and have them on the show a lot more often. So that's something that you can look forward to over the next few months, and I'm really excited to it. That's how you're going to win the culture war, is you have to evangelize the culture into the things which are not controlled by these very select few of unaccountable corporations that are able to produce, what amounts to fan fiction through legal means, right? They could produce it. They have the exclusive right to produce fan fiction on dead people's art due to the finagling of law. And indeed, Disney has influenced a lot of copyright law in the U.S. One of the things people notice whenever Mickey Mouse is about to enter public domain, lo and behold, Congress passes some new laws extending copyrights to be well beyond the death of creators. So, and it's like death plus 90 years or something now. Quite exceptional. Thanks so much for listening to this little diatribe. So the solution is you evangelize and you consume other things. Books are going to be the main key because they're cheap. They can't be suppressed as easily. You don't have to come up with millions of dollars to produce a book. But once these things are big and once they're part of culture, you have more people who are willing to commit the risk and produce movies. You never know where it's going to grow. But the main thing is you have to stop giving money to the people who are destroying the things that you love, and embrace the things that you love as something that was completed in the past, and look to new things that you haven't discovered yet. Spend time consuming indie games, indie movies, indie books. Indie movies are always going to be harder because it's hard to match the production value of big Hollywood studios. We can't really do it yet. But music, man, music's wide open too. Like, you don't have to listen to the same 15 songs like you had to in the 90s. You turn on the radio and it's the same 10 songs playing over and over again. That's not the case anymore. Music's wide open and literature's wide open. These are the things that we need to move towards. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.